Jessi, thanks for being on the show today. We have a lot to talk about, I feel like, and even going into something you really brought together with this authentic calm, which I really want to get into because those are two key words for 2020 for me right now. So I can't wait to hear about that. But before we get into that, I really want to go into why you came about becoming a holistic guide, going into functional nutrition, because it seems that you have a story through personal health struggles that led you into this. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. It'll be making it concise for you, right?
Go as
Oh my
long
gosh.
or as concise as you want to be. I always say, like, if you
Oh
want
my
to start
gosh.
in the womb, then that is where the story starts.
Ooh, the womb. I love it. Yes, I love that. I won't start there because then it
Okay.
will be really long. I could, but no, yeah, my journey to health was, or really into this field, I should say, is probably very similar to a lot of people in that I experienced health struggles myself, right? That's almost every practitioner, maybe not doctors, but definitely practitioners in the alternative holistic space. That's very common. So for me, it really began when I was young. I was described by my sweet parents as a very sensitive child.
Mm,
They're
I
so
know
kind.
that.
I was very sensitive, so very. Now I know what it was, but back then I just knew that I was. I was easily impacted by others' presences. I just my emotions were forefront. They drove me, and I was easily worn out. And then I woke up often in the middle of the night with a lot of stomach issues. And again, I didn't know what was going on at that time. My parents didn't either. They just thought I was a normal kid. You know, I wasn't really a complainer, but I was often in a lot of pain, a lot of nausea. So as like a child, I had a lot of hard time breathing, a lot of allergies, all that fun stuff. So um, as I grew older and went into high school and college, that's when I started noticing that I was different, that other people didn't seem to have those same issues, and or at least they didn't talk about them. And that I started feeling different, and that's when and my mom started noticing I was different too. So that's when I started going to a few doctors and just saying, hey, like, what's going on? I wasn't developing normally. I wasn't having normal symptoms of becoming a woman. And they would just kind of slap some names on me. I got PCOS. I got a few other things. You know, I don't really believe in labels, but that's, you know, what I was labeled with at that time, which a lot of the diagnoses I received were kind of unknown diagnoses. There wasn't a lot of answers. So I got kind of funneled into different categories attempting to resolve it. So went to college and really started kind of digging into my own health at that time. And my godfather was a chiropractor. So I grew up with my best friend, being very aware of like the alternative space, didn't really know what it was, but that all kind of came flooding back in college when my best friend really talked to me about, hey, why don't you look at the food that you eat? And that was the first little like aha moment of the food I eat. Well, I'm super healthy. Like I grew up in Southern California. My mom was a part of the original Jazzercise crew. Like we were healthy, you know, we were like the quintessential, California trendy healthy. And we ate salmon and, you know, all the good stuff, Mediterranean diet, Atkins, all of that was super popular at that time. And my mom was, you know, very active. We took vitamins from a young age. So I had this perspective that I think a lot of people still have to this day, that they're healthy. And yet I was having all these symptoms. So started looking deeper into food, did my first, it was back then it was an IgG test. And I didn't really know what that was, you know, but I had a really pretty radical doctor that was a normal allopathic doctor that had been kind of walking through this with me and just like, you know what, Jessi, I just heard about this test. It's technically not covered by insurance. It was very like the first time I experienced like a hush hush experience. Like, don't tell the other doctors in this practice that I'm giving this to you. But she basically like slipped me backdoor this test kit. And I went and did the test kit and came back and I was sensitive to all the foods, like all of them. And I remember this moment. I worked at the fitness center at my college and I got the call from the doctor with results. I stepped outside and she said, Jessi, I don't know what to tell you. You came back with high response, high reaction to every single food. There's a few that are, moderate, and a handful that are low. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what you should eat. Good luck. That was basically what she gave me. And I was
My
like,
prescription of good luck.
Yeah. And bless her, like she was, very out of her
Sure.
realm. And just even by giving me that, she launched me into basically where I am today. So I'm forever grateful to her. Even though she didn't have the tools, right, to help me with it at the time, she empowered me to find the tools myself. And so that started my launch into gluten-free and dairy-free and all the fun stuff that everyone's kind of aware of now. But back then that was like so foreign. No one understood. I didn't understand. So that was kind of the launch into that world. And through there, I started getting to know all the different amazing therapies there are, acupuncture, and I dove into chiropractic care and all these different approaches, right, to balancing the body, and kept thinking each one was it, right? If I just go to this one, they have the answer. Oh, they're going to solve me. They're going to solve me. They're going to solve me. And I would come away discouraged. And I'm not a slacker. I'm very much a 110% kind of person. So when I would hear from a doctor, maybe you didn't try hard enough. That's when I was like, I'm out, this is no, like if you saw how hard I tried, so I finally, and I'm trying to think of the moment, but I know that over time I started to realize, and it was probably a compilation, that each practitioner wasn't the answer. They were giving me a piece of my puzzle.
Right.
And each piece of that puzzle was a gift. But I didn't have the patience or the persistence to walk through the whole journey with one practitioner. And sometimes it wasn't the right fit. They gave me what I needed for that moment, and then I needed to move on to someone else. So it was kind of a two-way street there. But as I made my way through, I started gaining so much knowledge and seeing improvement in my own health and having just feeling a lot better, and kept moving through. And at that time, that's when people around me started going, whoa, Jessi, like you seem so much calmer. You're not as stressed. Cause I was very type A, just like, type of person, like, oh, you're so calm. You seem really healthy. Like I had a lot of acne growing up, so your skin looks better, just all these things. You're losing weight, all this stuff. And I was like, well, like I'm not doing any of the normal stuff. Like I'm not really working out that much. I'm not like doing all the things that you would normally see like in a cool, trendy magazine. And so I started kind of sharing my story and sharing my tips with others. And I think that's, often how it starts. And a lot of my friends were starting to go to different schools and programs because, of course, when you're in this space, you kind of start gathering with others that are on a similar journey. And so a lot of people were going to this specific nutrition program that I was really interested in, but I was like, no, like, I still want to go into marketing. I still want to be a creative. I still want to like, science freaks me out. Like I'm so that's not my natural, I should say, just it's difficult for me. Like it doesn't come to me naturally. So I have to work really hard to understand concepts, and remember them. But, I like 6 years later, after all my friends had already gone through all that, and I kind of almost felt like I went through it because I read all the books and I was just doing I'm big on self-learning and self-teaching. And finally I was like, okay, I'm supposed to do this. And there's like a story to that, but I went to school and that was kind of the launch into, okay, now I'm a practitioner kind of space, which was so different. And the truth is like my journey with my own health is continual, right? It's never, I don't think we ever arrive, right? It's maybe you come to a really beautiful space of balance, but you're constantly having to recultivate that and recultivate that and recultivate that because we live in a world of constant stressors and there's just no arrival. So that was something I had to come to grips with too in my journey. But all of that to kind of pivot towards authentic calm and how that came about is kind of a year before I decided to go back to school. I was working at a agency downtown, doing digital marketing, and it was like the dream job, just loving being down. I love like urban atmosphere. And so I was like getting all of that, all the fun. It was really fast paced and exciting. But honestly, I was really struggling because I was so sensitive and it was just so intense.
Yep.
So like I had all the skills for it, but not the nervous system. That makes sense. So I ended up burning myself into the ground, like absolutely burning myself into the ground. And my husband and I had planned a trip to France that fall. And I don't even know how we did it. He's an entrepreneur, so we're both just like crazy people. But we flew to France. And while we were there, I had a major wake up call of, I can't live this way. This isn't good for me. This isn't healthy, even though this is what I've been told my whole life that I should be doing. Go to college, work in an incredible, exciting career, marketing, branding, all this stuff that I had thought I wanted to go into. And then I realized I can't, and it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel healthy to me. And so, came back from France, stepped away from the job. And that next year I just dove into massive, self-reflection and processing. And it ended up being a full year. It was crazy. I meant it to be like a month, and then I was going to find a new job, and I ended up working for my husband. So I was working, but it was very mellow. And I basically took a whole year, which is such a gift. Like not many people get that. A year where I had a lot of space to process. And it was a year where I really went inward, and I did a lot of trauma work and a lot of processing and coming back to who I am, away from what others want from me, away from what culture tells me I need to be, even my education, the religion I was brought up in, just all these things that were putting these pressures and these expectations on me. And I grew up as a people pleaser. So I was constantly trying to meet these expectations. And I realized those needed to go. And so I was working through, that common term of delayering that onion. And I was just peeling back all these layers. And it's when I arrived, I think, at the layer of, oh, wow, my career, like I've been given this massive health journey, and I don't think it's a waste. I think it's a gift. And I think I've been in a way prepared for this next season of my life. And that's what led me into, oh my gosh, I have to go back to school. So that for me was that like authentic piece. But during that year, I actually called it something different. I called it a soul at rest. And that's really what came to me. And that was the phrase that I visualized in my mind as I was doing this work. And that's what kept coming back to me. And as I went to school and was learning about the nervous system, the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic, which we can dive into, it started connecting with what I was discovering about our emotional state and our mental state, and realizing that, oh my gosh, this is a big thing of, we can block ourselves from healing if we're not constantly cultivating this certain state, and I had these two words come to me of authentic calm. And that when that came, it just hit me like a brick. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I've never heard anyone say this, but it so captures for me in my mind what it is that I'm encompassing in the work I want to do, and honestly, what in my own journey. So it's a pure reflection of what I've been processing myself emotionally and physically. And it's something that as I was trained in many, many, many different therapies and perspectives, it just kept coming through. It was solid through all of them. It was just this woven strain that, oh my gosh, yeah, that applies. And so when I launched my practice, it was clear to me that everything I do needs to come back to cultivating this state. And how I define authentic calm, just to be clear, is I say it's your unique state of restful ease in body and mind. So it's unique to you, meaning, yes, we're all human. Yes, our functions are similar, but no one's had the exact genetic makeup that you've had. No one's ever had the exact experience you've had. And that in and of itself creates a human being that's very different from everyone else. So there's that piece. And then the calm piece really speaks to within the body and within the mind, we need to be in a place of ease. And by ease, I don't always mean peace or just, checking out. I mean, functioning well, homeostasis, balance, harmony. That's what I mean. Functioning as we were created to function. living and thinking as we were created to be. And instead of what we're told to be, instead of being impacted by all the trauma, physical or emotional, that's shifting and blocking and preventing our body from being in that state of homeostasis. So by cultivating authentic calm, that process is bringing the body and the mind back into balance. So does that make sense?
So important. Absolutely. At least to me, it totally makes sense. And again, for 2020, I set down that, one of the key words for me, focal points would be more authentic, right? There's a huge part of working in the medical field, not being a doctor myself, working on the business side, kind of having that a little bit like, should you be in this? You're not a doctor. People sometimes mistake, and I have to be like, hey, Dr. Schultz is my father, right? and they're like, oh, so you're not in, medicine? Like, no, I'm in medicine, but I'm on the business side and everything. And it chips away a little bit at you when you get that. And you start to be like, all right, let me sit in the background. But that's not my authentic self. My authentic journey was not to become a doctor like my father, but to help him walk side by side and influence a number of doctors and influence a broader field. So through accepting that authenticity of who I am, I feel much more at peace rather than trying to be something people were like, wait, you're not a doctor, go back over there. And I would listen. Right.
Yeah,
and I think we do that a lot. We have that imposter syndrome sometimes because the old ways of doing it is you need an MD after your name to be in medicine to talk about it. How could you even have an opinion about this if you never went to med school? In many ways, I feel I'm in a better state because I didn't have that programming and that kind of, that whole big pharma influence on me. And I see things in a very different way as an entrepreneur and creative mind. Like you said, I love applying that. So I love that authentic side, and it totally makes sense to me. If I could back up a little bit here and ask you now that you went through this journey and it started in childhood, can you look back on yourself and say, this was really the root cause of why I had these issues? Is there something you could look back on?
That's such a good question.
And the reason I bring this up, because you also talked about the nervous system, parasympathetic versus sympathetic. A lot of children that we've seen at the clinic, that I've talked to other doctors, are in a stressful state now, whether it is the constant kind of social media influences and lots of homework, this, that. It's a different time than probably when you and I grew up, and it's maybe more stressful. And I do know when you eat in a stressful environment, you go into a sympathetic nervous system state. You don't have peristalsis in the intestines. Your stomach juices don't go. You don't digest as well. And for younger children, that could turn into sensitivities. They even say when you have an argument in front of your child, they're eating something, they could become allergic to that substance because the body sees it as a negative, stressful event. And it correlates what you're eating to that. And children are, of course, more prone to that. Do you think that had anything to do with it, maybe?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, that's been a lot of work for me because when a lot of my beginning of my journey was focused on function well, I didn't know it was function, but, I was focused on my physical body of like, why am I getting these symptoms? Why do I have acne? Why do I have like terrible pains in my stomach, in my intestines? Why am I getting nauseous every morning when I wake up? Like I could list all my crazy symptoms. Why do I have reactions every time I eat food? Why do I break out in hives all the time? All these things. And, so I was very focused on the body. And so looking back, I would look at, okay, my mom, took birth control. I'd look now as a practitioner, I can look back and see all the things, I'm pretty sure her, microbiome wasn't beautiful when she birthed me. And that's massive for my own health. And that's not her fault. She didn't know. But she was part of that generation that was just she was on birth control pill for years and years. And, technically was still on it when she conceived me. So there's just a lot of stuff there. And and there's also family stuff, but, I think I was also born into a really stressful environment and grew up in a very loving home, but intense home. And so that's something that when I kind of moved through the body part and I started realizing, Oh, and this is something, it's so funny. I told my mom this the other day. I'm like, you were so right. She from day one was like, I think your problems are connected to you storing all of the emotions from the trauma you experienced as a child. And I was like, mom, sure, mom, when I was younger. And now I'm like, you were 100% right. I absolutely think that's what it was. And when I say trauma, I want to clarify too, because I think this is a really loaded word for people. Trauma can be light, trauma can be deep. And so I want to clarify and say that my trauma was probably light medium. Okay. So I was never, to my knowledge, sexually abused, things like that. Right. But I was verbally and emotionally abused. And I say that with the greatest love for those people. But that was just the fact, So that was really traumatic because I was a really sensitive spirit. Now, if I had been a different type of individual, like my siblings, I might have been fine, or it would have manifested in a different way. But because of who I was as a unique individual and my personality, the trauma that I experienced impacted me in massive ways. And because I was a people pleaser and I was firstborn, wanting to, bring peace to the family, be the perfect daughter so that we could, have a more calm environment. I stored. I received. I became the third parent in the family and did a lot of things to protect myself. So by doing that, though, I took on, habits, and I'm trying not to use trendy words, habits and ways of staying safe. Right. And so as I grew older, what I've now realized is I don't need those tools anymore. And I can let those go. And as I let them go, I start to realize all the stuff starts coming out that was stored. And that's really, I think, the journey of adulthood is reprocessing what we experienced in our childhood. And even, and once you catch up, if you ever do, then it's, gently reprocessing the things of your young adulthood and your marriage and your partnership or whatever, as you move through life. And I've heard, I don't have children yet, but once you have children, you do it again. So I think that's really the journey of life, right? Is I talk about this is you're coming back to your authentic nature. Mm-hmm. So my personal belief is that we came into the world created a certain way with a purpose, with an intention. And then as we came into the world, we got hit by, the trauma of our parents, their trauma, them, putting their trauma on us unintentionally or consciously, subconsciously or consciously. And, our schools, education, our culture, relationships we have, friendships, partnerships, all these things. And we move through life, jobs, bosses, they all are putting different stuff on us. And if we're, not taught to be cautious about what we allow in or what we believe, that gets married and woven into our perspective and down into the core of who we are. And by that time, if that's the journey out here, where you are here is very different from where you started out. And so I think that delayering process or that cultivating authentic calm is coming back, peeling back the onion layers, getting back to that core you, which is your authentic nature of who you're supposed to be in this world. And so that ties into purpose too, right? Yeah. And the reason that you're here as a unique individual. And I really believe, especially thinking about 2020, like we're all here for a specific reason. Like we were chosen to be here right now, you and I, Casper, on this day, having this podcast, following some really heavy events in 2020 for a reason. And it's not always fun and easy, but I think it's part of our journey. So, and that is being authentic, is coming back and returning to that place and lifting up those layers and getting back to who you were intended to be. So it's a journey for us all. But I think for me, to speak to your original question, my root cause was, I think, storing that trauma combined with the microbiome I was passed, right? So I think those two things married to create a gut imbalance that in my work, I'm really passionate about this, that can lead to all sorts of lovely symptoms that manifest into imbalances and then dysfunctions and then, down the road disease. And that's, I don't go there. That's a doctor's place. But that for me is, I can look back on my life and see that progression very easily.
I'm really glad you brought up that idea of trauma being personalized, because I think when we generalize it and compare traumas to each other, oh, you didn't go through this, how could you? It's really counterproductive.
Yeah.
We have no clue what someone's going through. Like you said, someone's sensitive like yourself. I was very sensitive as a child. You know, as soon as someone said anything negative, I would just quiet up and I would go into such a sympathetic state of like a ball and just sit there quietly. People are like, why don't you say something? Like, you know, I'd just be like, nope, not going to do it. And that, but I was in such a sympathetic, like my heart was racing, all of these, where someone else could just be like, what's the big deal? You know?
Yeah.
But that's where we have to respect individuality, respect that a trauma for one person is very different, you know, than how it is for another person.
Exactly.
And of course, that is going to impact their health, their well-being, how they process it, how they go about life, set their belief systems, all of these things. And it starts to add the layers onto the onion that you will have to peel back, as you mentioned. So speaking about that onion and authentic calm, take us through how you would approach a client that would come to you with several layers, several different personalized traumas, you know, all sorts of things, because that's, in today's day and age, it's never the one thing. Oh, you have this one imbalance, let's give you this vitamin, you'll be good.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
Gosh.
I don't
Wouldn't
think it ever did, but it would be nice.
Oh my
but
gosh.
it's the modern day person is just layered. Even if you are so-called healthy, you're going to have layers, because healing is a constant journey, and no one is at zero where they're completely fine and have none of those layers. So can you take us through a little bit of what the process would be, especially as you're talking about cultivating this authentic calm with a client?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question. So, and that's really helpful, because it's different for me walking a client through it versus someone walking through it themselves, right? So for me as a practitioner, people often come to me with one specific or two specific goals, right? Of, well, I'll use an easy one. You know, I have acne, or my stomach hurts, or this is a big one. I bloat a lot after I eat, because I work with a lot of women. And so, you know, we often get turned towards health because of our appearance or how we feel. And so when someone comes to me, there's always one or two things. And by the time they finish my intake forms, they're like, Jessi, oh my gosh, there's so many things wrong with me.
Those intake forms really kind of break it down, like, oh man, I am not that healthy, apparently.
I know. Well, so here's my thing. And please like rein me in, because I tend to go on rabbit trails sometimes. I apologize if I do that. But so many passions. My goal is always to empower my clients, because that was my journey. I never want to play God. One, I'm not a doctor, so take that off the table. You know, I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and flower essence practitioner. So for me, my journey and my goal is to empower my clients with tools that, whether I'm in their life afterwards or not, they can move forward with those tools. They can keep using them. So when a client comes to see me, like from the minute we start talking, I start educating them. And I always give them a warning, you know, take an hour to do my intake forms, because you'll need it. But they're very thorough, and they ask questions that most people would never ask, because there includes all the standard, but all the questions that I wish that practitioners had asked me, or questions that one did, but another didn't. And so I have the blessing of having the gift of so many practitioners that I personally experienced, or mentors or teachers that have really shown me a broad spectrum of what comes into play into health. And so by filling out these forms, and this sounds silly, but the simple act of not removing information. So if you've ever filled out a form for a chiropractor or a doctor, anyone, they don't often tell you why they're asking the question. They just have you answer. And I actually put the different organ systems when you answer the question. So you know you're answering, all these questions are related to blood sugar. All these questions are related to liver, gallbladder health. All these questions are related to the small intestine, not just gut health, the small intestine. And so when they're answering these questions, they're learning. Yeah. And they come to me and they're like, I didn't realize that that symptom was connected to the state of my small intestine. I just thought my stomach, my abdomen, where's my small intestine, by the way? So it's like from day one that we walk through, and that's my goal, because in order for them to be authentic, they have to understand their body. Right. And so it's a partnership. And I always encourage all of my practitioners, friends to do this as well. And usually they are, but to not play that God role, but to say, only I have the answer and you have to come to me to be helped. Yeah. I don't believe in that. I believe in being a partner. So when I come in with a client, it's a partnership, and together we're going to uncover what I call the language of your body. So we're going to get to know your unique rhythms and patterns, and that can be emotional, that can be physical. Sometimes it's both. I have clients that purely come to me and we talk about, with flower essence therapy, like emotional patterns. I have clients that come to me and talk just purely about physical. And I have most of my clients that we marry the two. We're talking about all the above, because they all interrelate and they all impact each other. So sometimes if they're having, a response to something, it's not that the nutrient or the food is bad. It's that they just found out that someone in their family passed, and that they're forgetting that, like, why am I feeling this way? And it's like, your uncle just passed and you were super close to him. Like, of course you're feeling this way. You're processing it. So that's like a really simple example, but that's, I think, what's important is to help my clients understand how their body works. So, from that first intake where we really dive into, okay, your history, and we start from day one, it's your health timeline is what I call it, right? Your health story. We talk about your whole birthing process. And again, not to blame your mom, there's no blame here, no judgment, but it's simply to understand what are the pieces that you were given. What was the foundation that was laid for you? And so if you came in and your mom, you were a C-section baby and things like that, and you weren't, inoculated, then right away, I'm like, okay, let's take a look at that gut. Did you have ear infections consistently? Were you picky with food? Just all these things starts to show us the building, right, of that imbalance of the gut is usually where we always come back to on the function side, on the physical side. But we start to see the patterns, and together we go through it and understand, oh, that's why in high school, okay, that's right, I got multiple rounds of antibiotics. And I never thought to take probiotics, specifically like spore-based or native probiotics, to like repopulate my gut and all these things. So it became, more and more vulnerable. And then in college, I got exposed to mold and mono and all these things. And so almost all my clients, like, their symptoms start after college, because those dorms, they get me every time. I'm so there's such health risks. Anyways, that's another story. But it's, you start to see how it grew. And for them, it's like, it just popped up all of a sudden, these symptoms. I was so healthy, and then all of a sudden this happened. But when we go through that story and that timeline, they're able to see, oh no, it started at day one. Okay, I get it now. And then we start to understand, okay, if this has been building your entire life, the idea that I could give you a supplement or even run a test, which I love running functional tests, I'm all about them, and do what I call a foundational reset, which is like 3 months of really like rebalancing the gut or rebalancing the hormones or whatever it is that we need to do. It still might not fully resolve everything, because 3 months versus like your whole life, like it's a journey, So again, it's about educating, because we live in a culture of instant gratification, and I am 100%, I struggle with that all the time. I'm I love being quick. I love moving forward. I like being efficient. I don't like detours. Like, get me there quickly. Let's do this. No busy work. But in flower essence speak, that's very vervain, very Empatians. But so I see that in my clients, and I feel that, and I'm like, I'm with you, like 100%, because what's beautiful is, since I've been on this journey myself, it's like, I know what that feels like. And I can say, I know you're in pain. I've literally felt that pain before. And so I'm not going to tell you just get over it, or tell you, well, it's just the journey. Like I don't say it like that. It's, how can I help soften those symptoms now, understanding that it's not going to resolve the root issue, but how do we help resolve this pain or this suffering that you're experiencing while still working on that root cause? And that's another big thing as we work together and create that pattern, it's about making a plan together. So a plan of, okay, let's look together at how do we want to start delayering the emotions. Mm-hmm. And for some, that's referring out to a therapist. I have some beautiful therapists that I will send people to. If it's lighter and something that, can be done on their own, maybe with a little bit of the flower essence help, which we can dive into, and my guidance around those, that's beautiful. Those pair so well with nutritional therapy. And then on the physical side, mapping out a plan of, okay, do we want to just balance symptoms? And I have a lot of clients that they're like, Jessi, like, I can't dive in right now. Like, now that I understand, okay, they can look at their life and realistically make a plan of, I can't dive into something super deep right now. Right. But I want to feel better. But I don't just like give them supplements and say, you're all better. I'll give them supplements with them understanding this isn't going to resolve it. You got to know there's no pill. You're going to at some point have to delayer your physical process. You're going to have to reprocess all of the infections, not all, but, give your body the tools to reprocess everything at the physical level. And that can be done, in a big way or in a slow way over time, but it's something that needs to be done. You can't just continue and it stays neutral. Like, it keeps building. Just keeps building. So for those that are like, I'm all in, they're usually the ones that like, I've been to all the doctors, I've been to all the different practitioners, I'm seeing an acupuncturist, I'm getting massage, I'm with a therapist, and I'm not feeling better. And that's where I go, all right, you and me, let's do this. We're going to dive into multiple testing, functional testing, usually always gut testing. I love the mediator release test for checking in on that cell response. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, that are listening, it's a food hypersensitivity test. So it's different than like a food allergy test or a food intolerance test or even an IgG test. It's a cell response to food. So if food causes inflammation within the body. So those are two big ones. And then from there, also just checking in on hormones. So massive. So, and of course, as we're talking about stress, the adrenals. So like a thorough cortisol panel and things like that, really diving in and getting an understanding of, okay, let's go even deeper and not just look at symptoms, but let's actually look at numbers and get the understanding of how your body's functioning. And that's where we create a plan from there. So the goal is to bring the body into a state of balance and bring the emotions and thought patterns into a state of balance, right? So my two tools are nutritional therapy, holistic nutritional therapy, and flower essence therapy. And I can dive into those if you want, but
yeah, I want to get there in a second. It's a really interesting topic that I don't think I've discussed yet on this show. So you could be the first to go into flower therapy there. But before that, I wanted to, again, look back a little bit on those pieces that you're talking about: gut health, adrenals, hormones. What percentage of patients, or I should say clients that you work with and people that you see, are exhibiting dysfunction or imbalances in those three portions of their body?
90%?
Yeah. I was going to say, is it like near 100?
I mean, it's for the modern body, and I don't say this to be negative, but the reality is everyone is struggling. We're in a really intense environment right now, and we've really up-leveled our technology to a point where our bodies haven't caught up. So the amount of stress that we're experiencing relationally, technologically, just culturally is immense. So yes, usually people come to me because they know their hormones are out of balance. And then they find out that, that has to do with the adrenals and the thyroid and, these different organ systems. And then we go back, that's impacted, by your body's immune system and its ability to handle everything. And, that comes back to the gut. And then we talk about the gut and that balance. So, to be specific, usually when I'm running tests, I often guide people to start with gut healing because that is often the root cause. Not always, but most of the time it is. And when I run, I love the GI map test. I saw you posted about that on Instagram.
I did, yeah.
Like, I love that test. So beautiful, so accurate. Yeah. The best stool test on the market, in my personal opinion. Mm-hmm. And I have yet to have a client come back with a stool test that was quote unquote perfect. And granted, I want to clarify, I'm never looking for perfect. I'm looking for load. So how burdened is the body, right? And that coming back again to creating this state of calm. And we haven't quite spoken to this yet, but and maybe I will right now. The nervous system and your body's immune system and how much it can handle. So I like to describe our body as having this big to-do list. Right? It's got all these things it's got to do. Oh, I got to get rid of that virus.
There's like billions of checks it has to, every second, basically.
Yeah. Oh man, we're not prioritizing cortisol right now because we're in that alarm state, like all these different things. And so my goal when I work with clients, and even when I'm looking, this applies to everything. So specifically when I'm looking at like a stool test, I'm not looking at, okay, how can we rebalance everything and get everything optimized and make it perfect? And we're going to keep going till that test comes back and it's, all stars. I'm looking for how big of a load is on the body here and how many of those checks, like how many of those to-dos can we check off for the body? How many of those can we help the body move through so that there's more space? That's what I'm about. More space within the body because your body is so incredible. Mm-hmm. It's so brilliant. Even with all these burdens, the fact that people are walking around, I'm constantly impressed. I'm like, how are you surviving? Like, how are you doing what you're doing? I'm always impressed by people that, appear healthy and I'm like, you are struggling. So, it's how do we lift that burden off the body so that it has more space to do what it was created to do and heal the way it's intended to heal, because I'm never healing someone. Never. Mm-hmm. Never. The body is healing itself. My job is to partner with my client and help them identify what's blocking you, what's adding to that load that doesn't need to be there, and how can we remove that, right? So that the body has a more manageable to-do list so they can easily check off and it can go back to normal function, healthy function, and power through in a beautiful, fantastic way. So with gut testing, that's usually how I utilize it. And same with the hormones too. It's that always for me, I'm looking at the adrenals and thyroid, but just, it's not always about, okay, supplementing with specific nutrients. Sometimes it is if that's all the client can have space for, but it's also about what is contributing to this load. How can we remove stressors, emotional, environmental, relational stressors from the adrenals? It's not always just about supplementing or changing food. Usually with hormones and adrenals and thyroid, it often has to do with emotional, relational trauma or just everyday stressors. So opening up the lens and seeing, okay, what's your relationship like with your partner, with your kids, with your boss? What does a normal day look like? And so creating rituals that are very soothing to the body. Because can I dive into like the parasympathetic and sympathetic?
Absolutely. That's part of the calm, right? Having that balanced. Sure.
Yeah. So to speak to the functional body, we have our autonomic nervous system, right? We have our centralized, but the autonomic nervous system, in charge of things that we don't think about, our heart beating, all of that. And within that, we have two options for our body. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And I'm going to keep this really brief. The sympathetic is what we know as fight or flight. It's our emergency response. I call it your alarm state. Okay. It's where your body, what you were describing when you have conflict and your body just everything tightens up. It's different for everyone, but usually it's just this fast heartbeat. It's an intensity about life. It's a protective mode, right? And some people experience it in different ways, and some people stay in that state continually. And that can be as simple as like fidgeting, like they can't not move. Like there's constant fidgeting and because they want to stay in that sympathetic state, because going into the parasympathetic is going to bring up a lot of stuff. So alarm state. Then we have the other state, which is your parasympathetic. And this is your rest, digest, and I would add on detox state. This is where you restore. This is where you have normal, healthy function. And I call this your calm state. So this is unique to you. This is, the place where we really want to be living. This is where we have health. And so the bummer is that you can't be in both at the same time. Your body has to choose. So if you are in sympathetic, if you're in alarm, you're not in calm. And if a lot of us are constantly being triggered, constantly being pushed over into that alarm state, we're not able to do the normal healthy function of the calm state. And so when we were talking earlier about that building, so if you think about when you're young and you're you don't know how to process emotion, you don't know how to process maybe even physical experiences. And so you just shove it, or you just stay in that alarm state continually. And as you stay in that state, your body's not able to recover. And so over time, the simple function of not being able to digest food properly, like you were saying, when you're in that alarm state, your digestive juices, your gastric juices do not release properly. Your stomach acid is alkaline. And that's one of the few places where you actually want acidity is in your stomach. Most people don't realize that. And so all of those things start to go simply from being in that state of alarm. And so when food comes in, it ends up like fermenting in the intestines and starts impacting the intestinal lining, and that can lead to leaky gut, and that can lead to food sensitivities and all sorts of issues. So it just builds and builds and builds, and it starts with being in that alarm state. So as we take a look at our life and we take account for how much of my time am I spent triggered or in this state of rush or in this state of alarm? And again, it looks different for everyone. Some people be like, oh, I'm not frantic. I'm not, freaking out. But can you sit? Can you be still? How is meditating for you? Do you hate meditating? Like answering those kinds of questions. Is it hard for you to fall asleep? Like there's so many different ways it shows up in a body. But when you're in that state, it's letting us know that your body's not able to restore. And when it comes back to the simple act of healing, healing occurs in the calm state. So if we're not in the calm state, we can't heal. And that is the biggest number one block I've encountered through my personal life, through my training, watching, interning, learning from my mentors, and now experiencing with all of my clients. That's the number one block, is this inability to stay within the calm state. And I'm speaking from a person, I'm doing this work because it is my work. Like I too, this is the constant battle every day of cultivating my unique state of restful ease, that calm state in my physical body and also in my mind and my emotions, but creating a space for my body to be able to do its natural, healthy function of balancing, restoring, detoxing, digesting, all of that great stuff that we want it to do. And so that's where the work that I do is really about bringing in tools that can help to cultivate that. Because the reality is we're in a world that's constantly triggering us, constantly bringing up this state of alarm, whether it's you're driving in a car and suddenly your phone rings and you're freaked out by it, or your child is losing their mind, or a dog, or there's all these different things. It's a boss, it's an Instagram comment. Right now there's so much going on that you can be triggered by politically and relationally as a result. So it's how do we, in that chaotic life, cultivate calm? And so a lot of people are like, oh, you mean like peace, right? Like, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. It's not just this, because peace to me is just like kind of almost disconnected, just like I'm just, and that's how I define it, right? Other people might define it differently, but I feel like it's kind of an easy check the box. Oh yeah, that's fine. I'm talking about still being in the middle of the chaos of what's going on in 2020, still feeling frustrated about not being able to go back to work with COVID or different things like that, but being able to at least have moments or even maybe a few hours in your day where you're able to cultivate that state of restful ease, and that things aren't resolved, nothing's perfect, but your body's in a state of rest and your mind is in a state of rest. And that is done through these different tools. So it could be nutrients. It could be taking ashwagandha. It could be, as simple as adding salt to your water sometimes, right? There's so many simple things. It could be taking a moment to go horizontal on the floor. It could be doing breath exercises. I'm a big fan of breath exercises, of just for a moment, just breathing in and out through the nose,
Right.
taking a flower remedy, all these different beautiful tools. There's so many out there. And so it's really about bringing those forward and to make it authentic, picking the ones that work for you, right? Because for me, I love flower essences. Like, I'm all about them. They're my personal favorite. That and breath exercises and a couple of things. But for me, those are like my go-tos. And a lot of my clients love those too. And or we have other ones that we cultivate, right? Because it's all about finding what works for you. Not everything's going to work. So
Absolutely. I mean, so much of what you're going to find that works for you is just experience, going into it and trying it. And don't become overwhelmed. We're listing a lot right here, right?
yeah,
And you could
we are.
say, my God, that sounds like hours of work. Why don't you just try taking 3 deep breaths right now? That will actually
Yeah,
activate the parasympathetic system if you do it.
absolutely.
Also, take a longer exhale because that activates it, right?
Yeah,
And then go from there and try something
absolutely.
new. Just add 1 minute of, just meditation or just mindfully listening to music, going outside and just
Exactly.
closing your eyes or looking at a leaf. This all activates your parasympathetic. So it's not to say
Totally.
that you become overwhelmed and say, oh my God, it's
Mhm.
actually adding to my sympathetic nervous
Yeah.
state.
Now I'm stressed about being in my calm state.
And that's the
Yeah.
problem. A lot of patients have information
Mm.
overload that just
Oh,
adds
yeah.
on to it. So it's almost like more checklist for your body when it's already
hmm
inundated in this stressful situation. Now,
Such a
one
good
of the
point.
things you brought up a few times now that can absolutely help are flower remedies. And
hmm
I know a little bit about this with Bach flower remedies and
hmm
others we've used for emotional things. But for those that don't know anything about what is a flower remedy and how does it work, what is this all
Yeah.
about? Can you go into that? Because you have your own line as well, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. So, yes. And I use Edward Bach's flower essences. So, a flower essence, and I like to keep it really simple, and we can dive into more of the intricacy behind it. But a flower essence is simply a really, really light infusion of the blossom of a plant, typically.
Mhm.
There's a few outliers.
Yes.
But it's basically my favorite way of describing it is it's the patterning of the plant. So it's similar to if you're familiar with herbal remedies or even homeopathic remedies.
Mhm.
It's very similar to those in that it's considered an energetic medicine, an energetic therapy, and that it's working on the subtle body. So if that's a new term for anyone listening, that just speaks to who you are more than just what you see, to the invisible, right? And there's many different theories on what that encompasses, but I see it as, to keep it simple again, thought patterns and emotions.
Mhm.
So uh, Dr. Edward Bach was the originator of the Bach flower remedies. And for a little history, he was a doctor backed in the 1920s and 30s over in England. And he basically founded this gentle, subtle form of therapy because everything else that he had used as a doctor, he felt was too invasive.
Mhm.
So he started out as a typical allopathic doctor, moved into research, actually helped to create some of the first vaccines. I'm sure you know this.
Mhm.
Really helped us uncover a lot of the information we know about the gut today, which is really fantastic. I always geek out on that. He was just brilliant, man. So, and not many people know that about him, but he was, yeah, uncovering some original research there, and then moved into working at a homeopathic hospital, which was pretty common back then. A lot of hospitals were homeopathic. And once he was there, he started getting introduced to homeopathy and kind of fell in love with it. He loved the idea of combining not just the body, but adding in the mind and the emotions when looking at a person's wellness. And from there, did a lot of work there and decided that he wanted to basically extend the work. And so he decided to find something that was even gentler because homeopathic is still a physical substance, right? You're still taking a physical substance and you can, you're having a chemical, depending on the dilution,
Delusion, yeah.
chemical
Mhm.
reaction of some sort. And he wanted to move into something that was even gentler, which I love because I'm a sensitive spirit. And so that like speaks to me. But he moved out to the countryside and eventually landed there and lived there and started researching all these different plants from all over, and was influenced by, Celtic history and all sorts of different traditions, but basically assembled 38 flower essences that matched specific personality types, because he came to the conclusion, which I think this was brilliant, because this was way before we were all considering personalities. And I'm all about knowing yourself and love the Enneagram and human design and all those different things. But he was way before all of that, at least in Western culture, right? Western culture is a little behind all that kind of stuff. But he started contributing or noticing that each person presented disease in a different manner. So instead of treating the disease as a doctor, he started treating the emotional state, and noticed that when he pinpointed it perfectly, the disease was able to resolve. Mm-hmm. So I see that as an indirect solution or resolution. And for him, he was very passionate about the way that we think and respond to the world emotionally is how we manifest disease, or how we respond to trauma that rolls in physically. So that's kind of his story. And so his remedies got really popular, and they're now used all over the world, and people have extended what he's created. And now there's, because you can technically take his extraction process, which we can talk about, and use it for any plant. Really, it's so beautiful. Sure. And people also use it for crystals and minerals and all these different things. So you can utilize it to get the patterning and the energetic essence, basically, of the substance. So people in Australia and even here, in America, we have an incredible, the Flower Essence Society is the big organization here. And they have done a lot of research around more local plants, which is really beautiful. But I just fell in love with Dr. Bach. I really appreciate his approach. And then a gentleman known as Julian Bernard, he is creating Bach essences in Dr. Edwards' style, I guess you could say, or his exact measurements and research. And I've really come to respect him as a practitioner. And so he's who I source my essences through. And we can talk about that too, if you want to, like that patterning or that history there. But I have found for myself that flower essences are the easiest way for me to shift my mental state. And I've tried a lot of things. And as I said, I'm a very sensitive spirit. So for me, I never wanted to take medication for anything because I knew I would have a poor reaction. So and my family, a lot of my family do, but I could never do that. So this has been such a gift for me because it's working on a different level. So it's not affecting my physical directly. And different practitioners will speak differently about it. So this is just my personal interpretation. But I believe flower essences impact our emotions and our thought patterns directly, which then can indirectly impact our physical. So how I've seen it with my clients is the clients that pair a flower remedy, so a custom remedy, meaning that there's flower essences chosen specific for their personality and or their current emotional symptoms, we could say, or what they're experiencing in that moment, along with, say, nutrients and food shifts and lifestyle shifts. When they pair those things, the change is dynamic. It's massive. It's like something I've never seen, and it's so quick. And then for my clients that don't do the flower remedies and just do the lifestyle shifts, the nutrients, things like that, it's slower. It's more painful. We're communicating a lot more because they're just struggling. It's hard. And what I found is it's hard for them to get through the mental blocks, the emotional blocks of healing. And yes. So when you pair all of that together, it's such this beautiful marriage that really just unlocks the door and allows you to move through the healing process with such ease. And so that's why I'm so grateful to Dr. Bach and to all of the mentors and teachers that taught me this practice. But I'm in love with how it works. So
I can speak to my own personal experience as well, going through grieving of a breakup or a loss of someone and using Bach flower remedies, that it is a subtle shift in processing your emotions almost.
Yes.
What the remedies are doing, and as you take them, basically it's not that you're realizing or having any physical reaction like you said. It's simply that you're able to process the information, almost go through a grieving process as you should without hanging on. It's the information, that subtle information, telling your body on that emotional, psycho-emotional state to how to process this. It's not to say stop grieving, because I think that's a huge problem. When we take any antidepressant or something, we basically dull it down. We don't ever actually address it. We never go through the process. We're stunting, if anything, the process that is required for healing. And what I realized is when I took them, I was able to process it and get through to the other side better, quicker, feeling a little bit more positive. So like you mentioned, there are these 32. I took the sweet chestnut, the larch, remember, and they are this wonderful modality. And I know naturopaths really like to use it because it does work so subtly and so beautifully on the emotional state of a patient. And then when you could combine that with other things, with more physical side or some emotional techniques, it really has this synergistic effect. So I think it's wonderful that you're using that, because we often like to go the other route of don't feel the pain, don't feel the grief, dull it with a psychotropic or any prescription drug you have around, one of the many, and continue on with life. But that is simply sweeping it under the rug, and your body will not heal, will actually start to go into a disease state if you don't address that, if you don't get through the process you were meant to get through in the event. So.
Well said, Casper. Exactly. We end up burying it.
Yeah.
Is what I say. And medication does that, whether it's physical, like an antibiotic oftentimes can do that, or it's emotions and we're blocking them out. And I want to say this too. I think sometimes we need that because we're not ready. And
Absolutely.
so I think there is a place for it. But when you're ready to delayer, when you're ready to actually face what's blocking you, or you're in a state where you don't want to use medication, or you can actually marry the two. You can actually do it alongside medication. So I don't want to take medication off the table. You can do it alongside that, but you want more support to process. You want, basically, it's helping you become your authentic self. So we were talking earlier about your authentic nature. It's not making you something that you aren't. It's bringing forward more of the original you. So when you think about, I like to think about really simply as far as like positive and negative. It's not that simple, right? But we'll do it for the illustration. We have positive thoughts, we have negative thoughts. And similar to the gut, right? We have beneficial bacteria and pathogenic bacteria. And again, we'll simplify that too. But we want more of the beneficial. We want more of the positive. And it's not that it's this fakeness that's coming from outside of you. It's you. It's your natural positive coming forward, right? So say, I just had a client today order my courage remedy, right? Which is a combination of flower essences that creates a remedy that I call courage. And in there's specific essences that help her be able to face what's coming at her, whether it's known or unknown, that apprehension of the unknown, 2020, or something that they know is coming, she knows is coming, and she's feeling, nervous about it. And so it's beautiful because these essences help to bring forward her courage, as opposed to giving her a chemical reaction that is not natural or normal for her. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because it does bring out, everyone's going to have a different reaction depending on who they are, right? Exactly. It works with you. It doesn't force, it works with you. Whereas a drug, you're expecting, this is the reaction in the human body of everyone. We don't care if you're sensitive, if you're
generic
this, if
response.
you're an Aries, or what you're back. That doesn't matter to us. A plus B equals C. But we don't live in that Newtonian world as humans. We have all these different, we're so unique that we should have a different reaction to the information given. But it is like a subtle whisper to each cell in your body to to do what it's supposed to do as you would normally. And each whisper is going to be a little bit different that way. And that is the beauty of a lot of these subtle energy medications and approaches, that they're working with your body. Stop trying to force it.
Yeah, they're all about homeostasis. Because flower, and this is what's hard, is flower essences aren't as well known here. They're actually often utilized, but people don't know it. So Rescue Remedy is the standard one.
In Whole Foods all the time at the checkout counter, the little pastilles in the yellow container.
It's so funny when I ask people, because I also work at a resort spa called Golden Door out in San Marcos. And so we have people coming from all over the world, and I teach about flower essence therapy there. And, I always ask, okay, who's familiar with flower essence therapy? Who's heard of this? And usually people are like, aromatherapy? They're like, can I smell it? Can I taste it? No, like there's no aroma. There's no, you do take it orally or topically, but it's energetic. And so when we dive into that, I'll say, well, are you familiar with Rescue Remedy? And they're like, oh, I'm like, that's a flower remedy. Everyone's like, what? I give that to my dog, or I have my child take that, or whatever. And so there's so much that we take in our everyday that we don't even think about. We don't even question. And so it's funny when people hear about energetic medicine or therapies, they get all like, is that real? All these different things. But there's so much in our life that we don't even question, that is on the same plane. So another example I like to give for people that have a hard time grasping what it is really technically it could be considered, and again, this is my personal opinion, an adaptogen. Because what it does is, if you're familiar with adaptogens, they bring balance. So whether you're high or low, they bring you into the middle. So instead of, taking something that's going to push you high or low, it's just going to bring you into balance. And that's what the flower essences do individually. And then together, they can create a specific movement forward. So it's really beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. And that is such an important thing, as you said, in bringing about this authentic calm, is finding that balance, that harmony of everything. And it's your own, right? You're not trying to force anything up or down here. It's about you finding where your balance is. And that's pretty much what the definition of health is, that homeostasis. Looking at everything going on right now in 2020 and the impeding alien invasion that everyone thinks is coming, it's one thing after another, right? It's like they're getting nervous about it. It's our time. Everyone's seen that. What is your advice to everyone going through this incredibly challenging time, and with so much stress and so much going on, and no one even knows what to make of it yet? I think a lot of us are just processing what's going on. And for many who are sensitive, what would be your advice? What would be maybe 3 actions they could even take right now to just kind of, go with the flow a little bit more and make this an easier time on their bodies, on their minds and spirits?
Yeah, great question. 2020 has been very heavy. So, and this is where I'll be honest, I have a hard time giving general recommendations because, for those of you listening, like, this is unique to you. So take that with a big gallon of salt. I would say the first thing is that we need to simplify our lives as much as possible. And in a lot of ways, that's being done for us. But simplifying our lives as much as possible, meaning, where can we remove excess stressors? And this is going to be unique to you. So my action step, or my recommendation for you, is to take a moment, whether it's today, tomorrow, and just find some place where you can be by yourself for just a hot 15 minutes. Maybe it's in your car, it's in the closet, in the bathroom, you shut the kids out, like whatever you need to do, get 15 minutes. And just want you to write down, what would be a peaceful, calm, restful environment for you, and what that would look like, and just describe it. And then I want you to describe your current environment. And instead of judging it or getting upset, I want you to see where these can start to overlap. right? Of what of that ideal environment you can start to bring in, and what of the current chaos of today you can start to let go, right? So then you start to create this lovely merged cultivation of restful ease within the chaos. You haven't left the chaos. It's still there. It's probably banging on your door, but you're able to get a vision of what that would look like. And then the next step would be starting to implement it. So I loved what you said earlier. That's something I say to my clients all the time. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be you put on your yoga clothes and you find this hidden studio and you're under a tree and you're just like, oh, having this moment. It's about you're emptying the dishwasher and you pause for a hot second and you breathe. You do 3 inhales through the nose, 3 exhales through the mouth. You're welcome. Anyone listening here can reach out. I have breath exercises I'd be happy to give you. My favorite one is called Counting to Calm, and very simple. And so doing something as simple as that, adding that into your day and allowing yourself to go a week or 2 with just that one thing. Because as you said, we can get overwhelmed by adding too many things at once. So first step, notice your ideal and the reality and start merging those. And then pick one thing that you can hold to that feels realistic, that's sustainable, that you can do, and implement that. And then if you're feeling that's natural, it's confident, you're not even thinking about it anymore, then pick another thing, right? And that's how we start to build and create the trendy world of lifestyle, a new lifestyle. But it's just about sustainable action, right? And moving in that way. And then the third thing I would say, sounds so silly, prioritize sleep.
Big one.
And I am speaking back to myself on this one. That's one of my biggest failings, or I should say struggles, is getting to bed at a decent time. Because talk about the ultimate state of calm, that can occur while you're sleeping. And if that is minimized or paused in any way, it's going to impact you. So the best way that we can come forward as humans facing 2020 is by getting rest. And that can be just at night. It doesn't have to be naps, doesn't have to be this loungy life. It can be just going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6. Like, it doesn't have to be dramatic, but just being really intentional about winding yourself down, getting into bed, sleeping in a restful environment, and waking up and facing the day. Because if you don't have that sleep, your emotional state is going to be all over the place. Your physical state is going to be all over the place. And whatever comes at you in 2020, whatever comes at us in 2020, you're not going to be able to face it from a place of restful ease. And that is my goal for all of us, is that we're able to cultivate this state so that whatever comes at us, we're not reacting, which I've been seeing a lot of, but we're able to respond at the pace that is authentic to us, with the words that are authentic to us, and with great kindness and gentleness and groundedness, so that we can bring humanity back together as opposed to what's occurring, with each different thing that comes forward in this year. Oh my gosh, the amount of division from January to now is just insane. So
a lot has happened, and I think those are great tips to slow people down a little bit. Incredibly easy to bring into action and implement, and you will start to see. I think it's the power of small wins, right? If you do it over and over, make it a habit, make it a ritual, you will see an effect on your body, on your mind, and on that spiritual level, and how you feel every single day. Do you feel that, with everything going on, there is a great opportunity for people to prioritize health and start to see how greatly important it really is? Because that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping out of all this craziness, everything, a quarantine, just the so much of the things we're seeing out there are overwhelming. They're shocking at times. But I want to always be positive, half glass full, and say, we're going to come out of this better. And if there's one thing from my perspective in looking at medicine and wellness, I hope that we start to see how important health is. How important. And health isn't just your body, of course, it's that emotional side, right?
Your perspective.
Do you think we'll come out of that with that? Are you on board with my positive silver lining
I am.
theory here?
I love it. No, yes, it's easy for me to be pessimistic. That's how I was raised.
And it's easy to be pessimistic in this time. If you're not, you're like a saint in general,
Yeah. And sometimes I would say optimism is even judged right now, right? Because it's so heavy. So it's a gentle walk, right? Of having, I think the best word to describe what you're saying is hope. Is hope that even though right now is horrible, absolutely horrible, better is coming. And this horrible state we're in is truly a massive transformation. That is the word that I've been living in this week, is we are all, no one is escaping this. We are all transforming. We are being forced to transform. And I think that we can come out of it, to be cliche, but as that butterfly, as something that's beautiful, as we're all being forced to face our ugliness, our internal ugliness, or our internal blocks or traumas, or whatever it is for each of us that's unique, working through that so that we can arrive at health. And to speak to the health side, I have the amount of clients I have right now is honestly slightly overwhelming for me because I think everyone's waking up of, I cannot carry on like this. If this is how life is going to keep going, I don't have what it takes. Like I don't have the cortisol production to speak technically to like handle this. I don't have the ability to respond. My body is withering away. My immune system is gone. And so we're coming back to, okay, whether whatever is coming forward, whatever is present, whatever is coming forward, I need to be stronger. Yeah. I think that's what people are saying. And we're realizing that that's not just here, it's also here, right? It's not just mind, it's body. I call it form, function, and space. That's what you need to create authentic calm, is a healthy, balanced form, our body, a healthy, balanced perspective, our emotions and thought patterns, and healthy space. And space is creating that rest, creating that ability for you to have margin to respond, overreacting, right? Because if we can all come forward to whatever else 2020 brings with gentleness and kindness and openness and understanding and transform together, I think this could be an incredible shift in humanity, right? So that's my hope. And it sounds like that's your hope too.
Yes. No, it's we're on the same page there, and I'm really thankful you said all of that, because I think a lot of people are saying, I'm feeling like something's wrong with me right now. I'm feeling no, don't feel that way. This can act as a catalyst to transform you into a better, right? Anytime you go through a transformation, it is difficult. Change is hard. Coming out of that cocoon, that's tough to do. To become the butterfly requires a massive amount of just, power and strength and getting through it. And that's difficult. That's going to hurt. That's going to bring up a lot of things.
A lot of pain.
But getting through that, we can come out of this in a better place. And I think that's what we need to focus on during this time.
Absolutely.
Coming out of this is processing, getting through it all, seeing it and righting the wrongs, but also getting through and then working together to help heal not just ourselves, but society as a whole. So that's awesome. Listen, I want to, kind of wrap things up, but I do want to ask you, because you said you're a big right-brained creative type. You love self-help. What are some of your favorite books? I like to ask this of guests.
No. Yeah.
And honestly, anything that comes to mind, don't think it has to be like this, remarkable work of literature. If it's Dr. Seuss, go with it. But what is a book you'd recommend people read, or don't even recommend it? What's a book that really kind of impacted you?
Oh my gosh, so many. I'm such a bookworm. I also have a pile of books that I have not read that I'm like staring at me.
I collect books and I don't read them.
Me too. like, have you read the book? I haven't. I just haven't read it.
It's on my bookshelf for the last year.
Yeah, I know. I'm like looking at my bookshelf. There's so many. Oh my gosh. I'm going to speak to. No, it's fine. That's good. I'm just going to speak to, because this is, I think, something not a lot of people know about, and I'd love to empower them with it, around flower remedies. I love Dr. Bach's A Guide. Excuse me, actually, I have it right in front of me because I was looking at it earlier. But A Guide to the Bach Flower Remedies by Julian Bernard. Basically, any literature by Julian Bernard, if you're interested in flower remedies, he's just phenomenal. He explains things so beautifully. And if you have even a slight love of plants, you're just going to fall deeper and deeper in love. So Julian Bernard is an author. And gosh, I am so bad on the spot.
No, that's a great one, because I think that's very unique. That's not the essential kind of, Tolstoy and this, which are, great and can beckon your soul, but that's really unique. And anyone listening that's going through any trauma, emotional or anything, definitely read that, right? That is insight into how nature is already there for us to help us deal with it. It's not that you need to go, and take something chemically based or have some kind of really, really deep, profound, realization to get through it. It's right there in nature. It's crazy how you could go outside and find most of the things that'll help heal us.
Right? It's incredible. It really opened my eyes to that. And not just the power of plants, but also the power of water and light. And really, I think what I love about Julian Bernard too is he does a really good job of explaining the invisible. And that's what we, especially as Americans, have a really hard time grasping. And I know personally, it's understanding that there's more to this world than what we can see. And you can choose to link spirituality to it or not. That's what I love about flower essences. You can make it spiritual, or you can take it out if you want to. But I really love how he describes it. And then as far as nutrition goes, solid, what everyone should have is Nourishing Traditions. Sally Fallon, she's a go-to. I don't agree with everything that she says or does, but for someone that just wants to understand food at its core, and also kind of some of the lesser agreed with ideas around food when it comes, to understanding nutrition, I think she's a great source. So that's something I recommend to all my clients to at least have in your home. And it's, the first part is a lot of information, and then most of it is recipes. And a lot of them are recipes that are old school, right? So if you've ever wanted to know how to make yogurt, if you ever want to know how to do sourdough, make your own bone broth, which I'm a massive fan of, all these different recipes that our generations really didn't receive that others did. They used to be passed down. This book is kind of a link to those older traditions. So that's a really great one if you're wanting to dive into health.
Yeah, those are great recommendations. Jessi, where can people learn more about you, your work, everything you're doing?
Oh, I can be found at merfleurwellness.com. That's my website, and it's MERFLEUR wellness. And at Merfleur Wellness on Instagram as well. I'm trying to be better about being present there.
I think you're doing a great job. I saw what you're doing. I'm like, all right, she's on top of it. Again, as someone who's totally social, media inept. Good job.
I try. But those are the main two places you can find me. And and then I have a podcast as well called Authentic Calm, so anyone that's interested in just more conversation around this topic. And I really use that space to kind of like you, Casper, I love it, to highlight other stories and their journeys and what it looks like for them as a unique individual to cultivate ease, because it's so different for each of us that it's helpful to hear another story. And a lot of them are entrepreneurs too. And then most recently, I'm starting to bring in experts that have incredible tools. Like I know we've had a similar guest on from Matrix and both Patrick and Dr. Mindy. And if you're listening, you got to listen to Casper's interview of them. They're incredible. But yeah, that's just another great space for more tools, right? To cultivate authentic calm.